It's the 8th day of November. It's the 9th day of the conference of parties. 2021. We got 2 Danas going on, do we? This one, Dana Durnford, the nuclear proctologist.org. And you can call in at 709-589-4406. 709-589-4406. Now, this is day 9 of a corporation trying to swindle over $100 trillion from the planet with the claims they're going to fix climate change. They're the same people, of course, that run the IAEA and the World Health Organization, blah, 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 blah. And this is one of their charmers. His job is to lie to you, same as the rest of them, about the effects of radiation upon this planet. And here's some useful idiots. We go way back in nuclear and we look at Robert Oppenheimer for a minute.
He knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
Right, because radiation never goes away. Scumbag Yahoo. Countries are not spending enough on adapting. Countries are not spending enough on adapting to climate change. Adapting to the radioactive fallout. Climate change is real. It's caused by decades, 75 years of nuclear being released into the environment. The tipping point was the Fukushima nuclear meltdown. And it's killed most of the phytoplankton, which is the basis. This is stuff that's food that's in the ocean, plankton. And it's the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestering chain. And so oil, gas, and coal, and carbon doesn't do that. By the way, carbon, you can't have trees or plants or animals or birds or insects or humans without carbon. Carbon, good. No carbon, bad. Carbon doesn't heat up the planet. They hate you so much, they're claiming carbon is killing the planet instead of what's really doing it is nuclear. I'll explain it to you if you're honest and you want to hang around for a few minutes. Fukushima, for instance, was the tipping point, but for 75 years, radiation's been hemorrhaging, unbelievably hemorrhaging onto our planet. But since Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, that's the Pacific Ocean. Right here is the Atlantic Ocean, that's Europe. This is radioactive fallout models from France, major institution. Radiation covering the entire planet. With a continuous plume, notice how the plume continues to come out. It's like a bomb just explodes, right? This covers continents and planet in just a couple of weeks. This was a 2-week model from France. Australia says it will continue to export coal on a massive scale for decades. Now that's Yahoo. First off, Australia didn't say it was going to continue to export coal on a massive scale. That's not the words you used, I'm sure. But Yahoo now has been bought up by this strange corporation. You can't get rid of them all of a sudden. The psychological game behind a successful negotiations. The psychological game. This is a conference of peanut heads, tree huggers and eco-fascists. Join hands, global government or the world will end. One world. If we got one world, then we only need one dictator instead of all the other dictators, right? One world. That's a very dangerous thing. You have countries for a reason, by the way. Eugenics movement calls for eco-dictatorship under UN rule, under UN. And UN was like, we didn't say that. No, they're like, get that out there in the media. So first off, a major polluter on the planet is the big container ships. Just one of these ships is equal to 50 million cars, and 15 of them are equal to all the cars on the planet, 760 million cars. So what's a bigger polluter? Your petrol vehicle or 15 ships? So 15 ships is equal to all the pollution from all the cars on the planet and trucks, buses and motorcycles, blah, blah, blah. There's 96,000 of them on the ocean at any given time. When you scale that up, that's equal to 46 trillion cars every day on the planet. 42 trillion cars on the planet, rather, every day. And so if you're going to go after the pollution producers, they're not on the table, and neither is the aircraft or the space industry worldwide. They're punching holes through our upper tropospheres and stratospheres and into space, and they're leaving a huge amount of pollution with these rockets. These rockets are not very fuel efficient. That's a polite way of saying they're a horrendous amount of pollutions. Every day astronauts doing net zero heavy lifting. Every day Australians doing net zero heavy lifting with 3 million solar systems now installed in Australia. 3 million. 3 million homes. It's about 12% of the 26 million people, I think. The 15 largest ships in the world. I went backwards. The milestone comes after rooftop solar achieved record installation levels in 2019 with 280,000 solar systems installed. And in 2020, last year, was 370,000 systems installed, an extra 100,000. And it's still surging. That's because it benefits the planet, but because it makes financial sense also to do it. And rooftop solar was able to account for 38% share of demand on the national's electricity market. That's that they put back into the grid. This is a model of the radioactive fallout for 19 days. This plume is the Pacific, but this is the Atlantic. This is the United States, Canada, and Iceland, Greenland, Europe. The entire planet covered in radioactive fallout in just 19 days, 460 hours. The plume didn't stop, despite that's what the model was modeled out to. Canadian long-term waste project. This is absurd. Canada's long-term waste storage project completed. When I seen that headline, like my heart dropped. My stomach got heavy. I was, oh my God, what have they got done now? Port Granbury project, long-term waste management. This was, the story is about a reactor that's defunct. And a project to relocate low-level radioactive. There's no such thing as low-level when it's coming to the nuclear. They're not going to do this with low-level. The industry's insane. To a new above-ground long-term storage facility has been completed with the final layers of topsoil and grass placed on the engineered mount. Do you get it? Canadian Nuclear Laboratories has announced, the scumbags, the capping and closure of the mount of Port Granbury project long-term waste management facility completes a project begun in 2016. This is a temporary storage site. It's long-term waste management facility. Long-term waste management facility. And what they done was they dug a hole, put their nuclear waste in the hole, and then they put a mount on it so the gamma shine, the neutron bursts wouldn't be too rough outside. But every time it rains, that stuff was washing. Wait for it. To transfer about 1.3 million tons of nuclear industrial waste and legacy storage from a legacy storage site was on the shorelines of Lake Ontario. Drinking water for millions and millions of people were poisoned. And so they got caught at it and they decided to make another site. You're going to love this. Well, actually, probably not, but maintenance and monitoring will continue far into the future. So I'm looking for pictures of this place. I got this story. Radioactive waste cleanup begins at Port Granby project site 2016. And I was like, I don't like what I'm seeing right there in the background. Now remember, every amount of radiation exposure increases your risk of heart problems and liver and lung and respiratory and pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism, diabetes and Down syndrome, schizophrenia. There's 1,800 illnesses and diseases. This is the site. So, this should horrify you. This is temporary access road here, 700 meters from the lake, that being Lake Ontario. Is it? My God. Wastewater treatment plant, mount location, facility boundaries are in yellow. And look outside the facilities, all farmland. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So it's all farmland. What the hell, man? What's wrong with nuclear anyway? You can't give them an inch. If you give them an inch, they'll cut your throat. And so, here's an example. Sizewell C nuclear power plant in United Kingdom. They're going to build it in farm country, surrounded by farms. All the nuclear power plants are built in farm countries. All the nuclear dumps are built in farm countries. Do you think that's an accident that this nuclear power plant and this one, every one that I went and looked for a high shot was surrounded by farmers' fields, every one of them. And all nuclear power plants are hemorrhaging. Even future nuclear power plants to be surrounded by farmland. So they can poison you because it sucks up the radiation. It sucks up the radiation. So you got the father of global warming, the father of net zero. You got the father, James Hansen, of climate change. And there must be what other one? Oh yeah, carbon footprint. You got the father of carbon footprint. The idea of personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of the fossil fuel company BP, designed to blame environmental issues on you and not the people that actually were creating it. That should give you a warm feeling inside. So they got a dump that nobody's allowed to pay attention to. It's right on Lake Ontario. It's downhill from Lake Ontario. Every time it rains, the rain goes through the dump and washes out into Lake Ontario, which is what the problem. Like the whole reason they done it in the first place was to get it away from Lake Ontario, and they moved it 700 meters back in farm country. So when they were putting it all there, all the radiation coming out of there was landing in the farm countries. Do you think that's an accident? An honest discussion on nuclear energy from the Irish time. It's actually, you're not allowed to have nuclear energy in Ireland or Australia, by the way. It's right into their doctrines. It's actually written into their laws. Net Zero Alliance plans to reject gas nuclear as green assets. Nuclear power electricity generation plants are prohibited in Ireland, by the way. The government has no plan to revisit the prohibition on nuclear power electricity generation in Ireland. Back to that when it got stuck in the middle somehow. Net zero. Oh, I got it on replay. Yeah, I forgot about that one. UN convened asset owners weigh in on taxonomy debate. So they want to put nuclear as clean energy. So if you have an accident, then everything is covered in radioactive fallout, and everything and everybody gets sick. All the birds, all the insects, all the animals, for thousands of years. Nuclear power station in Belgium. That's what I wanted to. The European Union will likely face investor backlash if it includes natural gas and nuclear energy in the green rulebooks. The United Nations, this is a corporation that has no sovereignty over anybody's country. It's no different than McDonald's or Tim Hortons or whatever. The United Nations convened Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance. And Net Zero, of course, I showed you who the father of Net Zero was, right, Miles, which is part of the wider finance industry's 130 trillion climate agreement announced last week. 130 trillion climate agreement. 130 trillion. Try wrapping your mind around that. Imagine winning the lottery and you get $130 trillion. Now you get it a bit. 130 trillion. How to avoid nuclear war. That's how you avoid nuclear war. It speaks for itself, doesn't it? Science pour coal, water, and Bill Gates' nuclear plans. Well, let's just go somewhere else. Many experts see the project as a misguided attempt to hit CO2 reductions. So CO2 is not the issue. Radioactive fallout is the issue. CO2 doesn't pulse energy every second for thousands and thousands of years. This radioactive fallout model is based on venting. It's not even based on the actual nuclear meltdowns. And so it's infinitely worse than these models. And they cover the whole planet. That's the Atlantic Ocean. Over there is the Pacific Ocean. This happened. You got to realize this actually just happened to us only 10 years ago. The effects now are in full swing. Mass species die off everywhere around the planet. Illnesses among humans have skyrocketed through the ceiling. Heart problems, liver problems, lung problems. Time has come to talk about the likely nuclear option for Irish energy. Irish energy. This is misguided. Now, so you're not allowed to have nuclear power in Ireland, but you're starting to see a lot of people pushing for nuclear power in Ireland, right? John Downing, and you can tell just looking at that guy, he's a degenerate scumbag. Airborne contamination at Coburg's nuclear power plant in Africa. This is an old, decrepit, a very old and decrepit nuclear power site in Africa, and it's on a earthquake fault line. It's had major releases, and most of the staff, major senior staff, have quit without even having another job to go to recently in the last couple of months. Nuclear regulator, the scum creeps known as the NRC, Nuclear Regulatory, assures that the contamination incident at Coburg did not involve reactor. But they don't tell you what it involved. Well, it's not the reactor. Well, what is it? Well, it's not the reactor. Well, what is it? Well, it's not the reactor. These people should be publicly hanged for what they're doing to you and your loved ones and the 8 million species. Floating volcanic rock poses a risk to nuclear plants as well as beaches. This is volcanoes producing rocks, and the rocks are plugging up the nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants can melt down within a few hours if they don't get their 1 million gallons of water per minute. And then you have a brutal, catastrophic event going on, right? All the whales are washing up worldwide now, and every one of them are emaciated. They're starved to death. We've killed. Scotland must reconsider the nuclear option. Duke Energy eyes offshore wind, advanced nuclear to meet North Carolina's worse than radioactive rain after Fukushima. A radioactive fallout was suspended near Earth's surface without settling down. A bigger and a scarier potential risk for children that are close to the ground and animals. Duke Energy eyes offshore wind and advanced nuclear that don't exist to meet the North Carolina decarbonization goals. So in 2015, most big countries around the world went for a big party in France and decided they're going to take over the planet and blame it on oil, gas, and coal, but coal in particular, when it's actually nuclear. And their solution is more nuclear. The solution is you have to deal with all the 440 we know about spent fuel pools in actual commercial reactors, but you got all the nuclear submarine dumps, you got all the 3 decades of dumping it into the ocean. All of this is splitting the atoms every day. And what that means is you produce these elements into the environment that never go away. And they can make pollen, and they do certainly, radioactive in the whole country. And so when there's pollen season, the pollen is actually radioactive. It's pulsing energy every second along with the other stuff. And you got to deal with this. You can't have this open to the environment, pulsing energy, almost at the speed of light and splitting the atom. Every atom is pulsing energy at the speed of light. So you have these invisible snowstorms of radiation covering the entire planet, pulsing energy every second. And you just, every day you're adding more from all these sources, all the power plants, all the submarines, all the nuclear ships, all the nuclear weapons, all the nuclear dumps. The more you create, the more atoms are produced every day. It's never, you have to deal with it. Some generation is going to have to deal with this. You can't pretend this is not happening and that it's sustainable. So United Nations like this. They're just a corporation. I don't understand why the whole world is groveling to this weird death cult and secret society known as UN. They're nobodies. You can't do it on your own. Site plan for nuclear plant to host launch pads for small rockets. So when I was reading the headline, I was like, oh God, these people are idiots, or these people are literally idiots. But it's an old nuke plant site that they never built a nuke plant on. And they were going to, apparently. I don't know what that building is, so you can't trust these people. But they got a cardboard cutout of a nuclear rocket for space. So this is a space site, not a because you get the connotations if you follow the news over the years. Japan does this posturing because North Korea is 1,000 kilometers away for them, right? Now, if you think about what happened in North Korea, they burned down every town in North Korea. Every town in North Korea was napalmed until there wasn't nothing left. None of their animals were left. None of their farmlands were left. They napalmed every community in North Korea. 65 years after, the Americans, well, this was United Nations. It wasn't U.S., it was United Nations that went to North Korea and burned down every community with the coalition using napalm, right? The United Nations done this. And the United Nations military is now simultaneously bombing or rocketing 7 different non-nuclear countries. 8th Army Chemical Officer Donald Bode is quoted as saying, on an average good day, pilots in the Korean War dropped 70,000 gallons of napalm, 45,000 from the U.S. Air Force, 10 to 20,000 by the Navy, and 4 to 5,000 by Marines. And the Marines nicknamed burning jellied gasoline as cooking oil. Perhaps 2 million Koreans, north and south, were killed in the Korean War, all in the name of opposing the rule of force. Right? They make up these cliches to cover exactly what they're going to do. 4 million casualties, at least 2 million were civilians. And after Truman fired General MacArthur in May of 1951, the former Supreme Commander testified to Congress, the war in Korea has already almost destroyed that nation of 20 million people. And I have never seen such devastation, and I have seen, I guess, as much blood and disaster as any living man. And it just curled my stomach the last time I was there. After I looked at the wreckage and those thousands of women and children, I vomited. Like that. This 65 years now of torturing anybody left till you turned it into an anybody dictator. Now you're going to blame the dictator. That's the coward thing to do. Instead of getting educated and finding out what really happened, you just regurgitate the military media's narrative. It's such a cop-out. Green trade-off? Russia beyond. Russia Arctic town gets clean with nuclear-powered showers. Now, the academy, this Russian nuclear floating Chernobyl was a scrapped barge that they got. It took them 10 years to build it. They had to find all the pieces and get the money, and it was an old wreck to start with, and they were using second-hand parts for a lot of stuff. And so they built this thing, and then they towed it up to the Arctic and plugged it into the community. And now they're getting showers, because they never had a shower before, apparently. They're getting showers due to this floating Chernobyl in the Arctic. And so when winter comes with vicious storms, I just shudder to think of how stupid, incredibly stupid, nuclear fusion, the energy of the future that could save the planet and could give us a black hole. University of Michigan climate conference, student team attending, and so they're gonna go back after, and they're gonna write a paper. They're gonna call it a study, and it's gonna say that whatever United Nations tells them to say when they get there, which is probably gonna be, got to give us 100 trillion anyway, so we can get started. United Nations is gonna fix climate change worldwide. If you give them everything you got in your country, this corporation known as United Nations. And so the scumbag, the mineral councils in countries and the mining medias pushing uranium brutally for 10 years since Fukushima. It really shows their true colors since Fukushima. You would never have found out how evil this whole system was without Fukushima melting down. When Fukushima melted down, the media turned on us in a bad way too, and it never stopped. Uranium long-term, don't buy uranium stocks, for goodness sakes. They were artificially inflated by a corporation over the last 6 weeks from Canada, from Ontario, known as Sprout. They bought up, they had they even called it a war chest. They bought up all the uranium reserves, and that artificially inflated stocks. And so now they're planning on spending $835 million more in the next week or so to get another, or next couple of days most likely, so they can get a boost in stocks. That's a kickback to United Nations to pump, because they give them stocks for $1, and now they can sell it for 60. Do you get it? So kickbacks is really something. It's an art on its own. World leaders put on a disappointing performance at the Conference of Parties 26. Minister stands in the sea to film Conference of Parties speech to show climate change. Now, good intentions, right? There is climate change, but it's not carbon. It's not oil. It's not gas. It's not coal. Take your coal plants out of your communities, and you won't have people getting sick by coal. Like, if you look up pictures of coal plants in communities, all you can do is facepalm. Like, why would you do that? So you can demonize coal now for decades with those pictures. They're haunting pictures. It's like Nikola Tesla. Patents means you don't have to build your pollution in your community. You can put it outside the community where the pollution falls first, right? You can put it 1,000 miles away and pump the electricity. You don't have to put it in the communities. And so good intentions, he's out there. This is public relation, right? But the countries out, now they were polluted by radioactive fallout from the nuclear weapons testing. They shouldn't even be living on them islands, unfortunately. To show how his low-lying Pacific Island nation is on the front line of climate change. The Marshall Islands, Bikini Atolls, places like Disney, Waktok, It's over 1 million square kilometers is radioactive from the Americans' nuclear testing. But that nuclear testing fallout also went worldwide, by the way. So you had Fukushima with plume models showing 1 million becquerels a square meter landing on the west coast. That's game over for the insects. That was this Xenon 133, which is a model like that. That's Xenon 133 right there. It decays to cesium, by the way. Radium, or 137, rain with 20 million particles of radioactive iodine, 131 per liter. This is absurd numbers we're talking about. Fell on the US. So think about the plume coming into your country. It looks like this. It's continuously coming out. It never stops coming out. Reactor after reactor blown up, fuel pools blown up. And that's game over in 16 days. That's game over right there for insects and birds and mammals and animals. That will set in motion over a decade or two an extinction event. You destroyed the forests and the forest floors and the glaciers by doing that. Another one was another study showing 220 million atoms. Count 220 million backwards for me. Maybe you'll get an idea what I'm trying to say to you. There was another study showing 465,000 times above detection levels after Fukushima of Xenon 133 in Washington, and it persisted for weeks. So carbon doesn't do that. Coal doesn't do that. Oil doesn't do that. Gas doesn't do this. Carbon doesn't pulse energy. You can't just, like carbon gas or gas, oil, and coal emissions don't make plumes like that. Or even close to it. Nowhere near it. It only goes a few, 50 miles in perfect conditions. But radiation, it doesn't matter the condition, the weather, or anything. This is what it's going to do. It's going to cover and envelop the entire planet. And it's going to rain out over a long period of time. But it's still melting down. So what United Nations is doing, they hid this from you. That's not part of the equation, right? They hid that and blamed it on coal. So the protesters are actually have been tricked and deceived and manipulated, are actually cheerleaders. They're saying, give United Nations whatever it needs. We got to stop the coal. They're good-natured people. They mean well, but they don't know nothing. They're regurgitating the useful idiot machine known as UN narrative word for word. That's the problem with Greta Thunberg is she's like pro UN. She's just regurgitating whatever UN says. She fell for the UN lie, and so did the people that support her. UN is just a corporation. Why would you listen to them? Why not do your own research? Mine is bulletproof. Mine is rock solid bulletproof. The documentation I'm showing you, you can take it into court and win. It's the evidence, period. Government refused to provide funds to research Fukushima effect. Because then you might realize, I just seen a study saying that all the species are going to die because of the radioactive fallout. Then you get your asses in gear. Fukushima radiation is still circling the globe, and that the levels consistently rise and fall in a 40-day cycle. Well, that's like high numbers and then brutal numbers. Not low numbers, but so you got brutal numbers and then brutally high numbers. Brutal numbers and brutally high numbers every 40 days. The numbers we're talking about, these are brutal numbers. Like 20 million particles per liter of rainfall. That's brutal. That's unheard of. It's unheard of. It's unbelievable. 220 million atoms, that's holy shit stuff. Oh, shit. If you know anything about nuclear, you're like, oh, crap. Idiots. We killed the planet. Devlin installs a temporary force at the New York Times Climate Hub in Glasgow for COP26, Conference of Pervs 26. Look, they didn't install a big picture asking why is the media on the right claiming they're in a pool at the top of the building to the left, and the building to the left, which is reactor 4, doesn't even exist.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011, leading to the country's worst nuclear disaster.
Yeah, sometimes the sound effects gets a bit loud. I screw up sometimes. Apologize for being human. Reactor 4 is over there. The fuel pool she talked about was up here. So instead of putting trees on display, why not put this picture up and say, why is
we are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi.
Why is mainstream media pretending she's in a building that don't exist? She didn't do that at Chernobyl, did they? Because Fukushima is infinitely worse than Chernobyl, and Chernobyl is brutal. As the Conference of Pinheads 26 enters the second week and people take to the streets to maintain their fight for climate justice. Whoever wrote that should never be allowed to write anything again. That's an embarrassment to society and 8 million species. So everybody's thinking about the people, but they're not thinking about the 8 million species. There's not a single person in the climate party that mentioned the species. Nothing. Not one. Not a word. Not a freaking sentence. No, not even a word. Nothing. And this is my 9th show. My second show, my third show, I actually done a die-off, almost a 2-hour die-off presentation from the last few weeks. Nursery school taking field trips so kids can play in areas with less radioactivity. So kids can play in areas with less radioactivity. So kids can play in areas. So rather than evacuate the children, nursery schools are taking field trips so kids can play in areas with less radioactivity, but then bring them back to the radiation areas. This is absurdness. The nuclear industry nuclear scientists have no right to exist for allowing that to take place just once. It's taking place now for millions of humans in Japan, let alone everywhere else. At what point is the world going to grab this industry by the throat and choke the shit out of it, I wonder? Former UN leader Scumbag Ban Ki-moon accuses the UN of failing the world. Well, it's not a corporation's job to fix the world, okay? UN is not supposed to exist. They don't have sovereignty over any country. Why is Ban Ki-moon, why doesn't he just shut his pie hole and go count his money again? The Conference of Pinheads 26 could not be more important, says Scumbag, because the reality is we have been failing. You're the problem in the first place. The IAEA has just spent 10 years burying what happened at Fukushima. That's the United Nations. Has spent 10 years letting the planet die from radiation. Now we're going to blame it on coal. And then the solution to that is more nuclear. You're lucky you're not here. I kicked the shit out of every one of you myself. The world's food chain could be compromised. That's not just for humans. That's for all the species on the planet. That could be compromised. It is compromised. The entire planet is covered in radiation. It's still hemorrhaging out of there. And you're yelling about coal plants. You're yelling about climate change. You're yelling about carbon. You don't even know what the frig is going on. You're listening to this corporation that has a 75 years since Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 75-year history of perpetual lies, and everybody's now what? Going to throw them $100+ trillion ultimately? You deserve whatever you get, I guess. Extinction Rebellion on your problem is going to drag down 8 million species with you. Extinction Rebellion leads conference of Pinhead 26 climate march. Well, Extinction Rebellion had a spokesperson known as Xeon Light, was a double agent, a sleeper cell with the nuclear industry. And she persuaded them for a couple of years, but they haven't existed only since 2018, right? She persuaded them since then not to protest nuclear power plants, to go after coal, to go after the fossil industry, to keep them away from nuclear. Then she went and came out and then tried to demonize Extinction Rebellion. She was an actual sleeper cell. And she worked for environmental progress, Michael Schellenberg out of the United States, who does a lot of writing for Forbes. These are nuclear lobbyists, and she has her own nuclear lobbying company as we talk. And she's now promoting nuclear in places like Britain and Australia. And Extinction Rebellion leads climate march as part of a wider coalition. So all the media is pumping out that narrative. They're pumping out. The police are the Pied Pipers with all the cheerleaders who don't understand there's real issues. Coal is not the issue. They got you by your nose, and they won't let your nose go. Now you're just walking around regurgitating whatever they say. It's incredibly pathetic. It's extremely dangerous. We are on the precipice of an extinction event, a major irreversible shift in ecosystem, high rates of abnormalities and mortality. You're talking about the radiation from Japan. X-ray-like images shows radioactivity spread throughout the bodies of the wildlife, and X-ray-like images have shown spread of radioactivity in the trees, the equivalent of miscarriages, stillbirths, malformations. Yeah, because there's no species there, there's just trees. President Joe Biden farted close to Camilla. Prince Charles. So just the whole thing. Now, Prince Charles got 150 servants. President Joe Biden let out a loud, long fart. Global climate change. Outrage as hundreds of trees were chopped down without warning. They had a Hurricane Morante in China a couple of years ago and blew down in just one area 500 million trees. Blew down a lot more than that. That was just one spot. But anyway, someone knocked down these trees, but they're not worried about radiation killing all the trees and dying anyway. Fukushima is a global threat and a global response is needed. The situation could prove catastrophic for the world. Top Hong Kong newspaper. How many warnings do you need anyway? How much information do you need before you fight? I'm talking to the people that bizarre thing going on in Glasgow right now. Scottish Wind Power is the conference of parties. They came in on 400 jets that produce more pollution than the entire country of Scotland will for a full year. But they're going to run the party on renewables, so that offsets it, does it? You kooky lunatics. Camden says a big price tag required for climate transformation. $130 trillion, right? You imagine how much money they burnt for this whole fiasco? Greta Thunberg, who knows nothing. She don't have a single articulate thing to say, and the whole time she's been put on a pedestal. She doesn't have a clue. All she does is regurgitates United Nations. This is a Manchurian candidate. Couldn't hope for a better one. And she's just a cheerleader for United Nations. They got her on this. She's down. She loves United Nations. She's regurgitated everything United Nations got to say. So she's working on, this is not rocket science. She's going to grow up at some point. But they got her up on a pedestal because she spends so much time on the United Nations website, I guess, over time, right? That they said, well, she's firmly indoctrinated. She regurgitates our narrative perfectly. And now, since she's gone down to Glasgow, the first thing the bobbies and the cops down there kettled her as soon as she showed up, surrounded her, and now she got handlers. They got her convinced somebody's going to kidnap her or something. And so now she got all these handlers following her around. Her phone is just tapped constantly. Rejecting the label of radical that has been assigned to climate action advocates for decades. By proxy, if you were concerned, you were a radical. If you were concerned, you were a protester. If you're concerned, you're an environmentalist. If you're trying to figure out what's going on, you're a useful environmentalist. If you go into the WHO or to UN site, you're a useful idiot. Thunberg's speech drew loud applause from thousands of other indoctrinated idiots who traveled to Glasgow from all over the world to regurgitate the exact same narrative. All over the world to regurgitate the same narrative as going on everywhere else. Right? So instead of, if they were going around with signs saying this is radioactive fallout, that's climate change, pulsing energy every second, that's the tipping point for all the 75 years of nuclear releases into the environment. It's killing all the species. Carbon doesn't do this, coal doesn't do that, gas doesn't do it, oil doesn't do it. Only thing that can cause climate change, and that's what's going on, it's climate change. It's the death of planet Earth. It's not climate change, it's planet Earth dying. And because we live in a geological age of billions of years, the planet now is dying. In 10 years, we've seen this catastrophic molting of most species on the planet. To deliver 100 billion to developing countries to help them adapt to and mitigate the climate crisis, as well as new promises to end coal consumptions. Blame it on coal, when it's obviously Fukushima radioactive fallout is the catalyst for the last 10 years. It's the only event that... so Obama shows up today, right? So-called celebrity, right? To arrest minutes before Barack Obama's speech as undercover armed cops, because all the bobbies down there don't carry weapons, right? Armed cops swoop on Glasgow property. And so then everybody starts Googling or looking, searching to see what happened. And then they'll find Obama. They'll find Obama regurgitating propaganda. Find Obama regurgitating propaganda. Hello. I'm good. Yeah. Do you want to go live or something? Yeah. Well, not really, but not really. But I'm going to put you on because you have to make it short though, because I want to get the show over with. No worries. Here we go. Yeah. Just give me a second. Go ahead.
Hey, how are you?
Yeah, you got something you'd like to add to the show? I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a great show you got going today. A lot of good information.
Glad to hear it.
What I want to do is what I want to say is let's do a fundraiser, and it's been 10 years since this happened,
Right.
and you do have some a lot of people that support you, and I think what we're going to need to do is we're going to have to take it upon ourselves to do this monitoring. I see you have that Geiger counter there in the back. Perhaps we can do fundraisers to purchase more of these radiation detectors and then get them distributed to some of your best followers throughout the countries and states, and report back to you on a daily basis for your shows to show how much radiation in what state and what country, and we do this to better ourselves and learn a little bit more when it is a really good idea to stay indoors, or because we're not going to get any information from them.
Yeah, no, we're in trouble, and we got to stop Fukushima. We got to wake the planet up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we're not gonna be able to wake it up.
No, it doesn't look that way.
What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to band together to try to support each other, I think. You're going to have to try to get it out on the community level, because there's more communities in the world than there are states and federations. And I think that one Geiger counter indoors isn't bringing home the point. I think we could do some fundraisers to raise funds for more of these Geiger counters and then get them distributed throughout the planet and have them all report back to you.
Yeah, the problem is that a real Geiger counter is going to cost around $1,500. The cheap ones are pointless, right? And by rights, you want to be able to... and so I don't really have the support. It took down my main site with 24,000 subscribers where I had reasonable support, and now I have very little, if any at all, sometimes, right? So, I raised like $60 in the last week. I can't fund this operation at this rate. I'm already in trouble trying to keep the operation afloat for the last number of years. I went through.
We couldn't get the
I went through everything.
Data from the East Coast, this year.
Trying everything, yeah, and then they took down my major site. That pulled the rug out from underneath me. So I worked hard now to rebuild this new site, but I have almost 500 new subscribers, but I can't get more than 30 people on the show. Even though I have almost 500 brand new subscribers, the video doesn't go out to them, right? And they forget. Okay, listen, good points. We'll keep. Yes, good points. We'll keep. We'll try our best, right? Is all I can say.
Well, you've been doing your best to let everybody know.
I think yeah.
You are reasonable and smart people.
That's right.
But I think it's time for them to say, okay, look, we're going to have to support each other in this mess, and we're going to have to do our own monitoring, and we're going to have to do it, worldwide if possible, and we're going to need a central source to relay the information. And I think that would be an excellent choice.
Okay, my friend. Thank you. Good stuff.
You're welcome. Have a good day, sir.
Yeah, you too. Like, first off, if people would chop up my video and post it on other sites, that would definitely help. Because I'm ran into the ground just keeping these shows working and trying to do that bit of research that I can do. And it could take me 2 years to get the equipment put together to go out and do a research project. I mean, that's absurd. And if I have a breakdown, I'm out of business for a whole year. Try until I raise enough money to fix everything and get it up and running again. This is absurdness. And what am I supposed to do, right? You got to keep trying. And the industry has trillions of dollars to beat me up with and any other opposition. But there's there's 1,000 public relation firms to handle people like me that are trying to have a conversation. And they got every dirty trick in the book. You can't even dream it up. I've seen it. And there's never ending of new tricks coming at you. They have control of all the universities, so they have all this censorship equipment that they need to test it out on somebody. They got no one to test it out on, only a handful of people. I happen to be one of them, right? And so, but I'm one of the most vocal ones, and I run an educational program. So I'm under siege. I'm literally under siege for quite a few years now. I've been in a court 15 times. I've been arrested multiple times. Gag orders to silence me, and it's never stopped. It's constant onslaught, trying to bankrupt me, trying to drag me through the legalese and everything else. And I have never wavered. I've never slowed down. I've never taken a step back. I've always taken 2 steps forward each time. And every time I went to court, I was there by myself. And I still never gave up a single time. And when they find me guilty, even though I'm not, because it's a hangman's court, I went and seen other judges to get restrictions lifted. I have to sit in court all days and then get to see the judge and then ask him to lift some of these restrictions so I can go do research. And I've done that, right? It's got well over a decade straight of my life dedicated to this nonstop, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. And that ain't going to stop. And because I don't appreciate people doing what the industry doing, what it's doing to me and to the planet and to all the species, my friends and my loved ones. And so I'm not going to sit in silence. And I was smart enough to understand they're going to do it to me and plan ahead. And I'm still going strong and always will be. In the hopes that we educate the population, enough people, if you can get 100 people like me out there beating the shit out of the industry, like you should, they panic over me. So imagine if there was 10 of me, 10 people like me being honest, providing the documentation, having a proper format, having a conversation, whatever. Yeah, they would lose their minds. They would literally lose their minds. And it's a coward industry. The whole industry, they don't have a single spokesperson in the nuclear industry that you can name. Not one. They don't have a single person there that comes across as a human to anybody on the planet. So they don't have one. So then, this is how propaganda works. Armed police working undercover, swooped on suspects just a stone's throw from where Obama was going to open his pie hole. So then, lots of media reported that first. Then the headlines came out for Obama. Obama slams Trump over hostility towards climate science. Obama says act now. The COP26. Obama criticizes China and Russia. Obama this, Obama that. Obama brings celebrity status. But it starts off with a salacious headline today of the cops swooping in 2 minutes before Obama was going to go and give his speech, as if they're there to assassinate Obama or something, right? And then everybody looks for the rest of the story. They don't find nothing. All they find is Obama this, Obama that. Obama wants to suck your dick. Obama grabs summit spotlight. Talks get tough. Obama grabs summit spotlight. Yahoo News, by the way. And I showed you how he done it, right? They came out with a fake headline, fake story. Day 8 was yesterday. As one climate warrior departs, another appears. As one climate warrior departs, another appears. Stella McCartney tells constipated parties, 26, the future of fashion looks bleak. Yay. So that's good news, isn't it? That's not bad news. It's good news. Glasgow, because fashion is ridiculous. Who gives a shit? Only the extreme idiot wealthy. They're the only ones retarded. Don't forget to spend $10,000, $20,000 on something that shouldn't be worn. Glasgow reacts to Barack Obama's speech as he references weak coffee and bad food. So it started off with all kinds of drama, and you can't find no follow-up to that story. Well, all you can find is Obama this and Obama that and Obama, Obama. Why is there a huge iceberg melting outside Do you know how much resources it took to get a 4-ton chunk of ice brought somewhere? It's a lot. Small fortune, actually. International Solar Alliance launches new research journal with Elsevier. So Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley are the 3 biggest publishers on the planet, journals. They actually have 23,000 plus journals between the 3 of them. So being published doesn't mean you're going to get read. It means it's locked away behind a paywall and no one gets to read it. And why would you pay a journal? Why would you give your scientific research to a journal who's now going to lock it behind a paywall so they can make a profit? Now you're published. Yay. No one could read it because they haven't got access to it. So why is a publisher taking something that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce and now claiming copyright ownership to it so they can make a profit and lock it behind a paywall? They do that 4.3 million times each year, by the way. But an Indian-led International Solar Alliance is an intergovernmental treaty-based organization, and they joined hands with Elsevier at the Conference of Parties. Chairman and former Minister Lord Barker warns, don't expect a big bang from the climate politics. Conference of Pinheads 26 talks move towards climate finance. Poor nations can't count. A dangerous lack of urgency. Obama calls out China. XR protesters hold die-in at the Conference of Parties. There's 20,000 children, you pieces of shit, die every day from diarrhea, pneumonia, and dysentery. You can cure it for pennies each, by the way. And you arrogant, pompous, hubris pricks down there pretending that coal is what's killing the planet, when in reality, you could have done the research like anybody else and you would have realized it was radiation that is killing our planet and has been doing it for 75 years straight. It's just disheartening to see so many stupid people to show up to regurgitate United Nations, this corporation known as United Nations narrative. Travel all that way so you can regurgitate their narrative. You got to give them everything. You got to give them all the sovereignty of all the countries. The scumbags from the BBC News, where Jimmy Savile raped over 1,000 children in the basements of these places. Bristol medic finishes backbreaking Conference of Parties 26 ice tow. He towed an chunk of ice. Now, every day you had to replace that chunk of ice because it would melt, right? Because he's sucked in by United Nations. He got sucked in by this machine. And then the hospitals, of course, are seeing the harm from the endless radioactive fallout. The hospitals are ground zero for all the sick people, right? So bless his heart, but all he's doing is regurgitating. It's not an ecocide, it's an omnicide, and it's caused by radiation. Political ads during the 2020 presidential election cycle collected personal information and spread misleading information. Political ads used multiple tactics that concern the researchers, including posing as polls to collect people's personal information, or having headlines that might affect web surfers' view of the candidates. We were well positioned to study this phenomenon because of our previous research on misleading information and manipulative techniques in online ads. This is public relation firms they're pointing fingers at. And nefarious facets of the governments. The researchers created a list of news websites to span the political spectrum and used web crawlers, programs, to visit each site every day. The crawler scrolled through the site, took screenshots of each ad before clicking on the ad to collect the URL and content of the landing page that the bot landed on. The team wanted to make sure they get a broad range of ads because someone based in UW might see a different ad than somebody in a different location. And we know that political ads are targeted by locations. For example, ads from Washington candidates will be featured to viewers browsing from the state of Washington. Or maybe a presidential campaign will have more ads featured in a swing state. Some political ads posed as polls to collect people's personal information. And we saw these fake poll ads that were harvesting personal information like email addresses and trying to prey on people who wanted to be politically involved. These ads would then use that information to send spam, malware, or just general email newsletters. There were so many fake buttons in these ads asking people to accept or decline or vote yes or no. These things are clearly intended to lead you to give up your personal data. And the team observed more than 29,000 of these ads, and the crawlers encountered the same ad multiple times, similar to the fake poll ads. And the world of online ads is so complicated. Yeah, Google does most of it. People can also limit how many ads they see by getting an ad blocker, which is why I highly recommend it, is getting an ad blocker. And a simple ad blocker, you can find what there's a lot of there really is a lot of them out there. They're easy to use, and you can get rid of all the trackers, right? On top of that, because they're not leaving cookies. So you block all the ads on your pages. I do it for all of my surfing, because otherwise they'll target the living shit out of you, and it's actually a form of torture. It should be criminal to do what they're doing. It's really heartbreaking. So we're at day 9 of the Conference of Pinheads. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. It might be a later time. We're having a few problems this week, so I might have to do a later time. It's because right now it's 11:45 at night, almost midnight. I do my show late because the West Coast time zones, and I just think about the whole Northern Hemisphere more so than other countries, unfortunately, because that's what I'm stuck with, right? Japan has permanently irradiated our planet, but it's going to get worse because they won't deal with it. They only have homeless and destitute and victims of society. This is one of the models of the fallout, a continuous plume covering the whole planet. That's climate change. That's global warming. The net zero and all the other stuff is meant to lead you away from the truth. The United Nations Conference of Parties 26 or whatever is meant to lead you away from this stuff here, right? Point you somewhere else. And the solution, all nuclear power plants, by the way, need 2 external power plants like coal, oil, and gas. Coal's the cheapest, see? Australia is polluting the planet with coal and uranium. And so they should just keep their pie holes shut down. They're already causing enough damage. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night on the other side. Have a great night, a great day tomorrow. God bless you. And take care.